Hi, I'm Jeff Foxworthy, and welcome to Gamekeeper Podcast. If you want to learn more about farming for wildlife and habitat management, then, buddy, you are in the right place. Join the Gamekeeper crew direct from Mossy Oak Land Enhancement Studio as they discuss the latest wildlife and habitat management practices, news, and, of course, hunting. There's no telling what you'll learn, but I'm going to tell you, I bet it's interesting. Enjoy.
We're live in 3, 2, 1.
All right, everybody, welcome to West Point, Mississippi, home of Mossy Oak brand camo. It's a hot one outside today,
Yeah, it's heating
Lanny.
up out there. It sure is.
Humidity is just crazy. Tox, you've been planting corn this week, hadn't you?
I was until y'all made me come in to work this morning.
You can tell he's not done.
No, I didn't get finished, and I'm going to pout the whole time.
So we
just
got to
fair
talk
warning.
fast today. Yeah. So putting corn in the ground, time to put some spring crops in the ground. Got all kind of stuff going out there in the gamekeeping world.
Last week there was some rain, and did you catch some of that just right,
No,
Tox?
not much. Not much at all. Not nearly enough. It's looking pretty morbid right now.
Yeah, it's going to be hot and dry. And
100
humid
degrees
for a
for 10 days straight with no rain.
Yeah.
Hope it changes. One thing about the weather forecast in summer, it'll change. I hope.
Maybe we'll get some
But
of
the
those pop-up
trend
things.
is not good right now.
while. Right.
Yeah.
Well, it sounds like you were goofing a little bit when you were supposed to be planting corn because you sent me a picture of a hybrid oak.
I saw it when I was actually working on the hydraulic line. It was right by the planter, and I had a hydraulic line blow off, and I had to.
That's a pretty brave statement. Dudley.
I was riding bikes with the wife yesterday, and we stumbled into a new find, and it's kind of a fun competition we've had over the years where when we
I
find
got through with that competition. I won it one time, and I retired.
But
I'm not
we
competing
always
with
send
Dudley.
each other pictures and like, oh, look what I found. And it's funny. I sent him one yesterday, and he was like, right back at you.
I had
found
just
one
taken
too.
a picture that morning. I was going to text it to him. This looks like a willow nut-all hybrid.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking it's actually somewhere we could get to real easy.
Yeah.
How cool is this? And before I could send it, I got one from Dudley.
Yeah, mine was an overcup white oak hybrid I found
Oh, wow.
in town.
Another?
Yeah,
Ah.
a new one.
That's a. What do
That's
we
a
call
harder
that?
to get one, too, and a unique one.
Don't we have a name for the overcup white cross?
We always refer to it as either the Stevens
Stevens
oak
oak, that's
or the
right.
Rainmaker oak.
Yep.
Rainmaker.
It's not named at this time.
Yeah.
Which we could have done.
Yeah, we need to get on
That's
that.
a whole different tree nerd story. You made to move on.
That's a whole nother podcast,
It is.
actually.
It is.
Exactly right.
Yep.
Yeah,
Yep.
it sure is. So today we're going to have a really interesting conversation with one of our own. We've got Todd Amenrud, who is the editor of our magazine.
Yes, sir. In the flesh.
Yeah, and then we've got Todd's uncle, which is Dave. And Dave, I'm gonna butcher your name, but
Smith.
Medvecky is that correct?
Yes, Medvecky.
Yeah, and look, you've been writing for the Gamekeepers Magazine for a number of years. We've done a television show with the two of you guys and y'all's relationship and how y'all help each other. It's just a really neat story that you guys have going on up there in Minnesota.
It's more how Dave helps me and what I learned from him. But yes, we have a great relationship.
Well, they kill some big deer.
Yeah, they do. Consistently, too.
Yes.
It's just not like one every now and then.
No, it's not, and it's very impressive. Their food plots, they really know what's going on, and I think Dave's got a really good handle on no-till farming, and so today in the podcast we're going to kind of talk about all the aspects of it from frost seeding because that's Dudley. This is something that's just right
That's a
up
big
your
thing,
alley.
yeah.
Yeah, I'm really excited about this one because we've all been tinkering with it, and a lot of our listeners and viewers have been tinkering with it and getting better at it, and I think we need to share the information.
Yeah. And it seems like there's more and more people that are interested in soil health.
Oh, yeah. I mean, the thought of making your place better as you farm it, is something that we all need to latch onto for sure.
Yeah.
Hey, one more thing too, with Todd, it's the epicenter of our northern research facility up there. I know we often, we're Mississippi this, Mississippi that, but it's important for everybody to know that Todd's got a whole research facility up there dedicated to biologic. We got Austin in Tennessee, and we got Todd up there. So he's the spearhead not only of the Gamekeeper, magazine editing process, but also of our research and development up there for biologic.
Yeah, and Todd's got a green thumb. He can grow some food plots.
Yeah, his look a lot better than mine do. I can tell you that much.
Yeah, whenever I have a question about soil or things like that, Todd's the guy that I bounce it off of first.
Yeah. So, Todd, why don't we start? What is your experience with no-till? And talk to us about that a little bit.
Well, I don't have the sophisticated equipment, big no-till drills, but I've done a lot of no-till stuff on, certain leases that I used to have where you couldn't bring big equipment in or you weren't allowed to actually turn the soil. We used to do some stuff like that. But I would say I only tend to use that type of no-till, like the hidey hole plot type thing, when I can't do it through traditional means, because almost always you're going to get a better stand if you can plant things correctly. However, if you do pay attention to several points along the planting process and make sure that your seeds make good contact with the soil, make sure you eliminate the competition, and give the plant some food, you can grow incredible plots without ever turning the soil at all.
That's interesting. And when you talk about we refer to some of those plots as we've got a product called Hotspot, biologic Hotspot. It's real easy to grow in certain scenarios, but there's still some things that you need to do. It needs to be fertilized appropriately, and it takes kind of the right scenario for that product to perform. But when it's right, and it does well. But we're also talking about
drilling.
Yeah, and I think a lot of
what
these,
we're calling the hotspot products is a throw and grow.
Right.
Something you can just cast out, maybe remove some leaf litter, and it'll kind of germinate and establish itself. But I think we're also talking about drilling in the ground on top of, I guess, not actually turning the soil over.
Right.
Right. So, in this instance, no-till can mean anything from just throwing seed out on the surface, like a frost seeding scenario, to actually using some precision ag equipment that's out of reach for a lot of our folks, including myself. And so we've learned how to use some of these more primitive techniques.
But real effectively, I think it'd be fascinating for people to hear some of the stuff Dudley, and he takes great pride in it because it has been unusual to see, but he has tremendous results, and I realize, and Todd, hinted at that too, there are limitations.
For sure.
But there are a lot of positives, and especially people that all they have is like just a hand seeder or a four-wheeler seeder, and they can't get a disc to it. There are some things you need to do, but I think I'd love for Dudley to explain his process, which is pretty simple, actually.
Yeah.
His is throw and mow, isn't it?
Well, let's hear it, Dudley.
Okay.
And one other thing, just be sure and mention is there's a lot more than the one product that will do
there's
this.
so many ways to accomplish this.
Yes, there's a lot more than the
With
hotspot.
all the seed products.
Yeah.
And
Honestly,
I think,
especially the brassicas, I think he'll tell you.
Yeah, I think when you first start out doing this, you have to go into it understanding that, something. It may not be a perfect stand every single time you do it because, again, like Todd mentioned, a perfect seed bed is hard to beat. But the way I do it, and you can do this with clover, brassicas, blends, but I've had best results personally with brassicas, and I'll start in the late summer here in Mississippi. We try to get our brassicas in the ground usually between September 1st and 17th. So I start the process usually, maybe in late July or so. I'll go in with the bush hog and I'll clip it really tall, maybe a foot tall. And then you just wait for a rain event, or if your soil's already got some moisture, all the grasses and weeds rebound very quickly. They're not too tall to where they would interfere with your sprayer. So maybe you're coming back to something that's 18 inches tall, 16 inches tall. You burn that down with whatever herbicide you use for burn down. I usually use glyphosate. And I wait about 2 more weeks to get a really good kill. And then I come back with my fertilizer. If I need to put some lime out, I put my seed out. And then I will mow it again, somewhat high. Maybe 6 to 8 inches. I don't want the blades contacting the ground, and so that just puts a really light layer of dead thatch on top of those seeds. And then your moisture, when it tries to evaporate out of the soil, it gets trapped right in that seed zone below that thatch layer. I've had years where I've done this and it rained 2 or 3 days before, and I put the seed out and not get a rain for another month, and I have an excellent stand. I've even had instances where it starts raining before we come back and mow it to cover, and it comes up great, even though it's not covered. So it just seems to get better and easier every year. It's like you're building that soil layer on the surface that's a better germination soil type.
Very interesting. Never thought about building the soil layer.
Do you think, because one of the things in doing some of that here, I've had a lot more trouble with some of these hard pan, heavy clay soils. It's tougher to do that on. It's actually tougher to get any kind of stand with some of these small seeds, to be honest with you.
Yep.
It takes a lot more work. So I think the happy medium between too sandy and too heavy clay would probably be perfect.
Right.
In a loamy
and my
kind of soil.
thought on that is, if you're worried about that, just try a really small area.
Absolutely.
And don't just give up after the first year. Try it several times. And I'm sure Todd and David have a different method that works well for them. But, there's farmers flying seed over the surface of their row crops.
Absolutely, they
just
sure
putting
are.
seed out on bare dirt.
Yep, wheat.
And having good results with cover crops doing that. So it works.
I would say that what you described is pretty close to the way that I would do it. And what Toxie said brings up a great point, that selecting the proper seed that you're going to put in. Obviously, we have blends specifically made for this, like Hotspot, but being as that you're not going to be able to get that seed down, an inch or 2 inches deep, selecting the right crop is crucial.
For sure. And I've had great results with brassicas. In fact, when I started out, I was seeding it pretty heavy, 12 to 13 pounds an acre. And I quickly realized that just about every seed was germinating, and they were too close together. So I've been going with the regular recommended rate on the bag, and even that's doing so well. I may dial it back to about 6 pounds per acre next year.
Yeah.
So you're doing all this with a sprayer and a mower or a bush hog of some kind.
Correct. And an over the shoulder bag
Cedar.
Throw and mow.
Well,
That's
you know what's people listening, on top of this soil health, which is really,
huge.
honestly, everybody has to learn it in their own way by listening to us and other people too. But the exciting thing also is out there is the people just hardcore, especially bow hunting people, but just hunting people, they can plant places that they didn't think they could get to. They just feel like they see somebody on TV with a 150 horse John Deere and all this heavy equipment and think they've got to be to that degree. And quite honestly, Dudley brought up a great point. Everybody should try things and experiment with things, just maybe a little at a time so it's not expensive to test it. And then you can find your own way. It's nothing like going and do it. It's kind of like driving a truck or driving a car somewhere. And if you're sitting in the passenger seat, look on your phone, not paying attention, you might go somewhere 4 or 5 times and forget how to get there. If you have to drive yourself one time, you'll remember it.
Yeah.
It's the same way with, practices in planting practices.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, that's right. So Dudley, have you and Lanny, have y'all planted the Hotspot product? Or it seems to me like, in my experience with it, you've got to get the leaves back. I mean, with a blower or a rake, so there is some soil there.
You have to have soil
contact.
contact.
For sure.
Soil contact.
You have to.
Yeah. The method I'm referring to, a lot of people call it poor man's no-till or throw-and-mow. I didn't come up with it. A lot of folks have been using it, but the Hotspot is, in my mind, I picture a little hole in the middle of the woods, and there's leaves all over the ground. And you've got to rake all of that back.
Yeah.
The method I'm using is in an open field.
Sure. So,
Well, with that being said, you got to also, listeners, watchers need to know that you just can't go to any spot and plant this. So if there's a bunch of matted down leaves or pine needles, you have to first make sure that there is going to be at least some sunlight making it through that canopy to get there. So, what I always would tell people back when I was answering all our emails, is that if there's something significant, knee-high growth or better growing in that spot now, typically that means that there's going to be enough sunlight coming through so you can get something to grow there. But with canopy, I don't care what you do. Without that sunlight, not going to work.
Sunlight.
Yeah.
Well, the good news is too that as it gets further in the fall, when the leaves start falling off, that helps. So that allows a little more diffuse sunlight in there on the plots. But there, boy, every year we hear somebody that plants a little small hot spot and throws a bag or two of fertilizer on it and just has a heck of a season.
Right.
But it's because of that little hidden plot that's on their lease that nobody else knows about. It can be a really good scenario.
So, David, Todd, what is outside of what I was talking about? What are some other types of pieces of equipment people are using for no-till? Like talk about some of the new implements and things like that folks are beginning to use more.
Well, first of all, I have one comment on your throw and mow. We do that here on teeny plots in the woods, just a small opening with a little bit of sunlight getting in. Actually go in with a handheld weed whip and mow it down. You can't even get a tractor and ATV to some of these spots. But you can do it by hand, take a weed whip in there, mow it down, take a backpack sprayer, do your spraying just like you're doing, but on a smaller scale.
Yep, I know. Yeah, and it works. It really does.
But Dave's got some of that big equipment,
okay.
like I would like to have. Also,
my big equipment is still small. My newest tractor is probably from the 1970s.
I'll tell you one more. I want to say one more reason people need to listen coming up with what you say, because when you apply this on a broad scale, one thing is a big positive. Not only maybe a better plot and better soil health and all, but you're going to save a bunch of fuel, and that's become a huge thing.
Yeah.
So I think everybody should be all ears. I know about what he's fixing to talk about, and you definitely going to make this all more economical. Especially the bigger you're planting, the more you're going to save.
For sure. Have you guys seen use of the roller-crimpers to try to get rid of the herbicide use?
Yes, I do have a roller crimper. I am experimenting with that yet. No conclusions. Definitely, the principle is great. And so I've got more to learn on it.
Right. And there's a lot of folks, you can go on YouTube and see some of these soil nerds using their roller crimpers and how effective they are. It essentially, it looks like a roller or a cultipacker, but it has, if you're familiar with the chevron tread pattern on the bottom of a pair of knee boots, they're welding these metal things that are in a V shape, like a chevron pattern, onto these rollers. And right when I think they call it the dough stage, or before the seeds mature on the top of the plants, is the best time to roll crimp it. And you roll over it, it lays the vegetation down, and the crimpers just kind of pinch the plant. So if it's a stem of wheat or winter rye, it just pinches the plant to the soil and damages it enough to where it can't come back. And it's at a stage of life where it's trying to make seeds, and so it doesn't really have a lot of spare energy. And so you're just laying that stuff down, and it's like thatch, and your seeds sprout through it, and it's like a natural form of herbicide or mulch.
So you would seed and then crimp over it?
Yep.
Huh.
Yeah.
Or you could crimp it, and if you've got a drill, you can drill into it.
Oh, drill on top.
I mean, there's folks, doing vegetables and corn and all kinds of cool stuff with it.
Yeah, our friends at Packer Max have the cultipacker have a crimper attachment for that cultipacker.
Right.
Wow, that'd be
I
handy.
just look at that.
And I'm hoping to evolve into using that. But there's a lot of good information you can find on YouTube of folks using that equipment. I've even seen some discussion about, we try not to bush hog during nesting season, and people are talking about, well, is there any difference in crimping? But that's a totally different subject we can get into later.
For some reason, I think it may be because of the huge companies that sell herbicides in the United States, but in South America, they literally do millions of acres that way rather than using herbicides. It's so much better for the soil because that carbon transfer is going on. Old plants are decomposing, new plants, so it's just it's so much healthier for the soil. And now with fertilizer costs going through the roof, it'll save you a bundle, not only, as Toxie said, in fuel, but the fertilizer costs as well.
Yeah, and reminding people that it isn't like you have to fertilize to grow a crop. I mean, you're just getting your soil. I mean, if you do a soil test, you may find you don't even need to do anything. Mm-hmm. But likely there is something. So you really are just trying to adjust your soil health to where it needs to be for that plant. But that doesn't, everybody, it's just so easy to randomly throw triple 13, 17 out with your food plot and get better results. But it's not necessarily needed. Yeah. Depending on where your soil is. Yeah. It may have everything and become healthier because of these practices.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah.
So soil tested.
Let's talk about these things, the no-till drills, and what that's about. And Mr. Dave, can you speak to that? Because I'm told you take advantage of what the NRCS maybe has, where guys can rent those.
Yes. Well, some of the soil and water conservation districts have such type drills, no-till drills available. Isanti County up here does have one available for rent, an 8-foot model. It was primarily designed for planting native grasses and forbs, but we use it a lot for pasture and food plot type work. The one advantage of the roller crimper is that when you roll a crop down, like say rye, it lays it down in a line rather than mowing, which it gets scattered. So then it's much easier to drill through. That's one advantage of using the crimper instead of a mower. Certain things aren't suitable for crimping, though. You have to have a stem, like Dudley mentioned, that actually can get crimped along that line so that it interferes with the moisture transfer to the head of the seed, and then it dies. No-till drill is an excellent piece of equipment to have. I do have one plot this year that was no-tilled. Actually, we no-tilled with a regular drill into standing rye. We put soybeans in, and that I'm watching the rye. It's almost ready to crimp, and the stage for crimping is when the rye is, like Dudley said, in the dough stage. It'll kill the best without resprouting. So I'm watching that, and we'll be crimping that shortly, hopefully.
The dough stage? D-O-E?
Yeah. So, when you get like a seed head off wheat or rye, and you before it gets hard, and as a seed, you can squeeze it, and it's like a milky substance comes out.
Mm-hmm.
That's the dough stage.
Yeah, that's the dough stage.
Yeah. Not Lanny's thinking dough meat, like dough, and he's thinking, what's the buck stage?
Yeah.
It's actually dough, like making biscuits dough.
Right.
So, Toxie, you use a no-till drill in some scenarios.
Oh,
on some
yeah,
of your properties.
absolutely.
Yeah, and the success. Do you
Really,
see a big advantage to it?
I honestly can't say that. I can say I've seen as good of results though, and certainly, it saves time with a lot of stuff to plant, and it saves money too. So I can't say I would just say, and I don't know enough that there's so many other variables, like especially the weather. I have seen it where in some years where we just cut and no-tilled. Basically, we did what Dudley does, except then drill through it. Mm-hmm. We did have better health of the food plot in a drought situation, for sure.
Because you're not turning
it preserves moisture amazingly more. Mm-hmm. So in that particular case, there's a bunch of positives if you can. But I still think every soil's different. That's even harder to do with heavy clay soils, because I've learned the hard way. Our brassicas, they don't do well planted deep in that kind of soil. You've got to, there's a happy medium. That quarter inch is, we talk about it's hard to get sometimes with a no-till drill. Where we had the most luck, honestly, we would actually have a prepared soil. And I mean, this started a long time ago. Actually, this was what I did was the origins of Green Patch Plus, 20 years ago.
Sure did.
And what we had done, we actually took the clover hoppers off the no-till drill. So that's in that little bit. And we planted our clovers that we wanted and a little bit of the brassicas there.
When you say you took the hoppers off, you mean you undid the tubes?
I undid the tubes and let them just dangle in front of the drill.
Okay.
And everything else was planted down the little furrowed rows. And so it did too. And we got a great stand almost every single year. And those were just dangled out on top of the ground. Those packer wheels in the back would cultipack 70% of the ground we rolled over too. And it spread it out instead of everything being planted in that furrow. What I found out, we had much healthier brassicas sprinkled on top of the ground than we did, drilled an inch and a half deep.
Okay, let's talk about this. You had a grain drill, and you put the brassicas in wheat is going out in one
Right,
seed in the rows.
That's right.
And then you took the tubes off, so the brassicas and clover are just
right. So
sprinkling out.
there's two hoppers. One's for small seed, one's for big seed, and your drilled rows plant whatever's in the big hopper. Typically a bigger seed like wheat or something, and winter peas or whatever you have. And so we would always because of it was too deep for clover, and I wanted clover behind everything. We just tried it one year, and we took the hoses off and let them dangle out in front of the whole drill as we planted. So they just spread them out, all the way across. It's a 12-foot drill. So the whole in two things happened. One, it was a better way to plant clover, and we weren't trying to jam all this seed into those furrowed rows. Yeah. And quite honestly, I've learned more and more that less is better. In a lot of cases, we were still trying to plant too many, especially some of the bigger leafy stuff. But it also taught me that these brassicas, especially in some of our heavy clay, just don't do well planted in that deeper furrow. And so, anyway, it was a way to turn that drill into a combination, soil planter, top seed. Yeah. And it works. Yeah, it works great. I've been doing that for 20 years.
With native grasses, I know folks just drop it on the surface.
And it's kind of the way the Furminator works.
Oh, yeah. A Furminator is actually great because it does both, honestly. You are disturbing the soil, and you can adjust that. But as far as a one pass for all of it, that's definitely the best. No question about it.
Yeah.
Speaking of native grasses, I was up at Dave's farm. This was 2 years ago when you did native grasses. Was that 2 years ago when you planted the big?
4 years ago, I planted
4 years,
27 acres of native grass.
Time flies.
Yeah, it does. Yep, it does.
And I couldn't believe it. So in all the different hoppers, the different types of seeds. Do you remember how many different types of seed you had?
30 some.
Yeah, so what then because the different size and the different weights of all these native warm season grass seeds and whatnot, you've got to put aggregate in another hopper to so it gets distributed evenly, and it was a pretty sophisticated process, I thought. Well, how did it work?
Wonderful. This was the fifth growing season this year. I did burn it this spring. I had enough thatch to carry a good fire. It's coming back just beautiful. Native grasses, M4, there's a lot of pollinator things in there, wildflowers and so forth. I don't like buying a mix with different size seeds. I ordered all my seeds to come separately so I could personally size them to which box in the drill would be more appropriate. Right. And as Todd said, I even needed some of the native forb seeds are almost like dust. You need some kind of a buffer to mix with it to get it distributed evenly. The drill I used was like a Brilliant type drill with the Packer wheels. Now this is not no-till situation, but it had three seed boxes on this one like fluffy for the native grasses, which are fluffy, a regular grain size box for seeding small grains like soybeans or rye or wheat, and then the small seed box like you were talking for the clovers and smaller seed. Right. So I divided the seed into the appropriate size box, put in buffer material if I needed to get it to go over. I mean, some of this was just ounces of seed to try and get over 27 acres.
Oh, wow. So, Dave,
I know how to mess that up.
Dave, they tell me you do something called, you refer to it as a fire plot. Can you explain that a little bit to us?
Oh, sure. Yeah, it's a real no-till situation. Around your food plots, you're always having trees fall into the plots or things to clean up, brush around the edge, or extending your food plot. You're cutting some trees on the edge, and I'll burn the brush in a pile. And sometimes these are only 10 feet in diameter, just at the edge of the food plot. And it prepares the soil perfectly. It burns off any vegetation that's there. It almost sterilizes the soil, any seed bank that's there. So it's really suitable for putting in a new seed. The seed that was, the native seeds that were there, the weeds and brush are set back. Everything's burned off. Small seeded things like brassicas or clovers are just ideal. Just a seed right on top, maybe lightly rake it in. And I believe Richie's probably has some pictures of that when he was up here filming a hunt with Todd.
Yeah, he's nodding his head that he does. So yeah, that sounds interesting. So guys, we talk about the word no-till gets bounced around a lot, and there's a lot of guys.
Really
I'm one of
broad,
them that doesn't have a tractor.
Right.
You don't have access. So sometimes some of these finding these other ways of doing things is you kind of have to do that.
Sure. And what Toxie mentioned earlier, I think everybody kind of thought it was access. Being able to get in there, and because doing it with a weed whip, we call it a weed eater down here. But you can actually get in there and do some stuff. So it enables you to take action and get some stuff going.
And some people don't have conditions for tillage.
No.
You get up in the Ozarks and the Appalachians and stuff, and there's rocks and stones and stuff everywhere. And
timber company stuff.
You keep trying to disc that, it's just going to degrade the soil so much that
and your
it's not going to want to grow anything.
Yeah, and your equipment. That's true.
So does frost seeding, and the way, especially the way they do it where Todd and them live, frost seeding it's just another kind of example of you're not turning the soil.
Yeah, I'd love for Todd to explain, the phenomenon of frost seeding.
Yeah, Todd, could you please?
Sure, absolutely. So not only frost seeding, but sometimes we'll actually do snow seeding. You really have to choose your area carefully because when snow seeding, because if you've got 6-8 inches of snow left, which is wonderful because you can actually see where the seed is landing and gauge distribution easily, but if all your snow melts and you're on a hillside, well, all your seed's going to eventually wind up at the bottom of the hill. So you have to choose your areas wisely there. I would say frost seeding is a much better idea, and it's just basically when the ground is heaving in the springtime, when it's thawing during the day and then freezing back at night and thawing during the day, it'll actually open up these little cracks and crevices in the soil, which you come along and put seed in there, and it works well.
And that seed just sits there until it's time or temperature's right for germination.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, we hear a lot of guys planting clover that way in the north.
Absolutely.
Now, Toxie, hadn't you done something like that here?
Yeah. Absolutely.
So it's truly frosting down
I mean,
here.
Not much snow. So
with our clover, especially non-typical, just good seed soil contact of any type, you're typically going to get a non-typically great stand.
Yeah.
Excuse my words there, but it's an amazing product. It's probably the most vigorous germinator that I think we've ever had.
So a guy that had a clover field, no matter where he is, if that winter, coming out of that winter, he noticed some bare spots here or there, that late February-ish, he could fill in those bare spots.
Yeah, easily.
I go through at least once a year all my clover plots. You got gopher mounds. Right. You've got where maybe you mowed and it was a little tall and all the dead plant foliage got put in a little swath, which is now, buried your clover beneath it. So a tire rut or whatever, and just to fill in those little spots like that, I do that once a year typically.
So you, at the right time of year, just go and kind of top seed your bare spots and your clover spots.
Typically in the spring, but yeah.
Down here, I would say still winter. I mean,
yeah.
you don't get as much leeway in the south that you
more-
would up where he is.
more
you could
folks
almost
are-
plant it year round up there. It's crazy.
More folks
Agreed.
are doing it in the south for sure.
Yes,
Planting
but I would
clover.
say down here by
In the spring.
by February, it's just that it takes that clover. You know, it's it's got to get enough root, and most of that first year you don't see much because it's
Sleeps and then it leaves.
well, it's just it's predominantly putting a root down. So you need to give it enough time before it dries out and gets warmer. But clover that I say this, Todd, the non-typical especially, all of them that we sell are great, but that one especially. If you've planted it the first year and it looks a little sparse, wait until it warms up. It's crazy how it will grow out and fill in the cracks and expand, especially that first year. And then after that, I think it's established itself and you see bare spots, you probably need to go fill them in. But if you've got, honestly, it's almost like if you have less of it in a stand, those that you have are more healthy and will fill it in. It's crazy. It just explodes. I know people say like kudzu, but it almost is.
Mm-hmm. So, hey, Todd, could you talk just a little bit about the timing of an annual food plot up in the north where you guys are, Minnesota, Wisconsin, that area? When do you've been doing this a long time? When do you get started trying to plant your maximum or your deer radishes? What's that time frame?
Well, if you start from the springtime, looking at all annuals, you would typically be planting your, soybeans and corn in the springtime, those first couple weeks of May, typically. And I would say brassicas, if you're this far north, we'll say from Iowa to the north, I would say as soon after the 4th of July as you have ample topsoil moisture or are expecting a rain.
That's crazy.
Which I know to some people that would freak them out. But
you just did. Thank you.
If you want to get the biggest brassicas possible, why wouldn't you guys know the answer to this, but then why wouldn't you plant them earlier then if you could grow bigger brassicas? Well, obviously you don't want them to bolt to flower and seed. They just aren't as palatable to whitetails if they get past that point. So, I would say the mid-July would be this far north would be for brassicas. Now cereals, though, I back off that. And this is one reason I know we have several blends where we have cereals and brassicas together, and they're great one and get it done type plots, but I prefer to plant my brassicas and cereals separately just because of this. And cereals, I would say towards the end of July, even maybe into the beginning of September, you can, because boy, when that, oats, wheat, triticale, things like that are popping out of the ground, that's like candy to whitetails right away when it shoots out of the ground. So, but brassicas are the biggest question, I guess. And even up into Canada, when I had my Canada property, we would be, end of June planting brassicas.
Wow.
Yeah. Well, I wanted people to realize that the timing difference, because where we are in Mississippi, and a lot of it is occurring in September, early September, and even late September. But where they are, they've got to get started a good bit early.
Oh yeah. No, it's a complete. Almost like we ought to publish a zone chart for the food plot seed, like they do from trees and native plants and stuff too, because there's a stark difference in what you can do. And then there's another one further south than us that's even later, And I guess temperature and moisture changes from year to year, but the length of the days too. Stuff just won't make it into the fall if we plant too early,
I hate that we use, y'all down there always use the term fall planting.
Yeah,
but
that's right. We're trying to change. It's tough.
Right. But if we literally wait until fall to plant anything here in Minnesota, we've already experienced our first killing frost usually by then.
Right.
So it's for sure going to be a failure. But that's why I always used to, in our literature that we'd send out to the public, I'd put late summer / fall planting. But,
honestly, we do a lot of planting before it's actually fall down here. That's the 20th of September or something. I think it's just in our mind, it's like for hunting over in the fall.
ready
You
for
know,
fall,
everything's
that's right.
geared around quote unquote
Sure.
fall hunting seasons probably.
Bronson's been pushing us to use cool season and warm season.
Yeah.
There you go.
So one of the things that I notice the most when people call in or we go to shows or stuff, that people that hadn't done food plots before are amazed that they could take something like a deer radish or a green patch plus and they could plant it, and in 2 weeks it's up and growing and deer are browsing on it. They seem to think it takes longer than that.
Depends on but you know, they're
Deer
up there
density
and
and everything
their warm soil is at a premium and goes away so much quicker than our. So, you know, if he plants a seed and we plant a seed, it's the same seed and it has certain soil temperatures. The brassicas here just don't grow as rapidly once that soil gets cold. So you really do, as he alluded to, you want a big jump in them when you got some warm soil. But you don't want too long of that, or they will bolt, or they will, you know, not make it into the. Once they bolt, they're pretty much gone downhill, don't they, Dudley, for the rest of the year? So it's a fine line, depending on, you know, your soil temperature, honestly.
Right.
They've got those really long day lengths in the
Yes,
summer
yes.
that we don't have, and slightly cooler soils. And
But we
you
have a
can
lot
really-
of warm spells going on into even November that will
Sure.
bail us out of a late planting. And Todd's not, he don't have that luxury in many years.
Sure. So Todd, Dave, do y'all pay attention? Do y'all do the soil test every year?
You get that one?
I do not soil test every year personally, but I've tested very annually in the past. I know my soil is good. I'm not taking a lot off the soil, just what the deer are eating. A lot is getting put back. So I can get by without soil testing once you get your soil up to snuff.
So I would agree with that. I would say, you know, when you take over a new area, you need to soil test it, and possibly for the next several years, even once, twice, maybe even 3 times a season, depending upon what you're doing to the soil. But once you know, okay, you get consistent readings year after year. And I haven't used any, speaking of fertilizer costs and soil health, Dave kind of got me on the kick, you know, using companion crops, better crop rotation. I have not spent 1 penny on granulized fertilizer over the last 4 years, just because of, you know, planting the right companion crop or following it with the right crop. So you're adding back what that last crop took out, you're adding it back, or what one crop likes, the other one produces. So
can you speak to that and give us an example of what you've done that's worked?
I would let Dave answer that, because he's the one who kind of taught me this. But it's just, for instance, when planting our deer radish, I was just to give him a hard time, because my plots would always, in fact, be on television and magazine covers because they looked so beautiful. And what Dudley alluded to before, it really doesn't matter that much. And in fact, some new research actually shows that a dirty plot might attract whitetails better. But Dave would always plant buckwheat in everything. And buckwheat's one of the best scavengers of phosphorus that there is. And he would also have some type of a legume, a bean or a pea in there, and a cereal in there. And I always give him a hard time because his plots looked so much rougher than mine did, but they outperformed my plots significantly. But I would let Dave maybe build on that answer.
Well, I try and use a lot of the soil health principles in the food plots. We got to really look at what the farmers are doing in soil health and adapt that to food plots. It really works. But like Todd mentioned, you know, the buckwheat is one of the plants that's very good at taking phosphorus out of the mineral soil and mobilizing it in a form that's usable for the other food plot crops. But you would need a variety of different plant families in the soil. You want living roots in the soil as many days of the year as you can.
Our radishes are wonderful. Deer radish is another great crop from bio drilling and bringing up the nutrients that have already leached through that topsoil. You got that 4 to 6 foot taproot in the radish that pulls up a lot of those nutrients from very, very deep in the soil. And then when that radish, if the deer doesn't eat it, when that radish is decomposing in the soil, then all those nutrients are now available for the subsequent crops. So there's a lot people can do to save on that fertilizer bill.
For sure. And it's being called regenerative agriculture these days. Folks have been doing it forever. It's suddenly gotten a new word.
I think that's the only way you could do it back in the day.
Right. And then we got addicted to these granular fertilizers that you have to mine out of the ground or use some type of chemical process to produce them. And now that the price of them has gone through the roof, I think the folks that have been doing a lot of these no-tillage type practices are winning the race. And everybody else is scurrying to learn all this new regenerative information. Sounds like you guys are, I mean, that's phenomenal. No fertilizer in 4 years.
Yeah.
In 4 years now, I just sent in some tests a few days ago. So I'll see, I may need some this year, but thus far, and things have looked wonderful. So knock on wood.
So help me understand too, when you're rotating these crops, because it sounds like you're inputting a crop and then coming back over and seeding on top of that. Is that correct?
Yeah, I'll take that one. Like with my biggest crop for hunting is the brassicas. They do well here. They produce a lot of biomass. They're very attractive. A good, healthy brassica crop here is great for the deer. And then when we get our frost and freezes, it kills down quickly. And there you get almost like, then you'll see bare soil again. And that's the perfect time to do your no-till seeding, like adding, like after a brassica crop, I'll plant a small grain, like rye in the wintertime. We'll get a little bit of growth in the fall for the deer will eat until snow covers it. And then you have the rye come up next spring. You have a lot of options there. You can no-till soybeans into the rye, or you can just roll the rye down, plant something like buckwheat just to build soil. The deer will eat buckwheat in the summer. It's not like a great food plot, but we have a lot of ag fields around us. The deer can go eat there. We're just building our soil, getting it ready for that brassica crop again. I never plant brassicas in the spring. You want some kind of a break between your brassicas. I do want them every fall, so that's why I plant something else in the spring to eliminate like diseases or problems with planting the same thing on the same ground.
I know we always talk about double cropping, getting 2 crops out of the same piece of ground in the same growing season. Well, I know that I don't know that I've ever been to Dave's farm where there's not been something coming out of the soil. And I know he's planted as many as 4, maybe even 5 different crops during the same growing season in the same plot.
That's interesting.
Hoping to build that soil, or those plants are adding back something that's necessary.
Mm-hmm.
Exactly.
Yes.
Yeah, that's really interesting. And these radishes that everybody's so excited about. I mean, the deer absolutely love them, but they also bust up the hard pan.
Oh yeah. Dave, do you turn the soil over just once a year, or do you ever bring a plow through all that stuff and kind of reset the clock? Is that right before you plant the brassicas again?
Yes, I can't get away from some tillage, and I mean, when you can no-till, it's great, but definitely we all we're going to need some kind of tillage at some time.
Mm-hmm. Is that once a year for you?
Yeah, everything I do is almost like week to week. I just watch the conditions and do what's necessary. There's no set recipe. Like say, watching your crops, you can tell when you need fertilizer just by how your crops are growing. Mm-hmm. Without the soil test. But so yes, in the spring is when I'll do tillage. And some of the reasons for the 4 crops in a year was that I definitely had some weed issues. When you're first starting out with your food plots, you got lots of weeds. So I would plant in the spring, cool season crops here like oats or wheat, barley. The deer like it when it's young, and then it starts to lose its palatability. Plow it down, then plant buckwheat. Let the buckwheat come up and weeds will start coming up. Disc it down. That helps control your weeds. Plant another crop of buckwheat. That comes up. Deer will eat it when it's young. Disc it down again for the middle of July and go to your fall brassica crop.
This man's farming.
So when you say disking in that scenario, I assume you're referring to like you're disking fairly shallow, like minimum tillage to just put that stuff right back on the surface, or are you disking it deep?
When you're trying to get rid of your weeds, you need to disc pretty much full depth.
Gotcha.
So for a couple of years, once you get your weeds bank depleted, which takes many years, then you can start getting away with less tillage, and then more relying on your biomass and the rye straw to keep suppressing weeds.
Gotcha.
But it's a process. You can't do this in a year.
And he's disking when it's cool still, right? Not like we do in
Well,
the
spring.
South in
He's saying
September. So it's
spring.
early.
But he's also talking about depleting that weed bank, and I'm looking at Toxie with all the ground that floods.
That's right. That's exactly right. That's what I was shaking my head about. It's so frustrating, but you can eliminate every weed from the soil. It'd probably take 10 years to do it, and there's a fresh influx every year in the drainages.
Well, that just goes to show that in different regions,
that's right.
Folks have evolved to do things differently, and and it works
we have,
well.
But it seems like it'd be better for us to plow when it's cooler than when it's hotter, even in the South.
Well, oftentimes when it's cool, the ground is also wet, and you can't.
Can't plow it, period.
And getting back to the no tillage, that's where I really won last fall. Is everybody that was tilling and disking, it was too wet to get their fall plots in.
Yeah, when it's too wet, it really, really shines because you're guaranteed,
Yeah, I was able to go out there a day after a rain and spray to burn everything down. And then a couple weeks later, when I was supposed to be disking, I was throwing fertilizer and seed out, and just using the weight of a four-wheeler. And I had no trouble. And there was plenty of moisture for my brassicas to come up, and kind of bragging, but I was around the office. People are like, man, somebody got stuck trying to plant, and we were disking and too wet. And I'm like, I got stuff coming up. I don't know about y'all.
Oh, Gamekeeper over here. Yeah.
Mr. Know-It-All, where's your little thing?
But it may fail next year. So
Mr. Know-It-All. That's him. He's our Mr. Know-It-All, though.
That's him. So one last thing to talk about. We always mention seed to soil contact and how important that is. And Todd, can you speak to your what a good, in your mind, a good seed bed looks like?
That's a question I don't know that has a specific answer to it, because where I used to think, boy, you just want, a piece of ground that's nothing but soil, no plant debris in it and everything, but that's not necessarily the case. Some of the best plots I've grown, as Dudley was talking about earlier about his Throw-and-Mow thing, that dead plant material on the surface of the soil helps so much with soil moisture and temperature. Exactly. So I wouldn't, obviously, yes, the seeds need to make it through and hit that soil. But boy, and this is brassicas. We keep mentioning all the different types of brassicas, but they are just an unbelievable. Not only are they a hardy plant, but they're hardy seeds.
Yes.
I plant test flats to bring to deer shows and whatnot, and I'll sit on my front porch and I'll spill some seeds, and I got brassicas growing knee high out of the cracks of my driveway and through the boards on my deck. It's amazing how hardy these plants are. And I would just say, if you can eliminate the competition that's there. That's possibly even more important than having a completely free, seed bed free of all debris and dying plants. Those dying plants are beneficial to the soil too.
Well, that's another brilliance of what Dudley does, or that technique, is that my own experience, anytime you disturb the soil, you just wake up all kind of noxious weeds, at least in my part of the world. So you think about that, if there's a minimal amount of disturbance to the soil, and get something germinate, not only that, those seeds, or correct me if I'm wrong, Dudley, but those seeds are drawing most of their energy from the seed itself and not having to get it from the soil. So at first, they can power their way through a little crack in the thatch that you have.
And then when
they're above that, then the stuff that's down in the soil may not make it through. So it's almost like when you put a bed of mulch over your garden after you've germinated it. And so you hadn't awakened as many seeds or weeds, and then the few that do, you're eliminating them by shading them out with a thatch. It's just a much better way if you can get away with it. Really is.
Yeah, sure. This has been fascinating, guys.
No doubt about it.
Lanny, we always talk about. Excuse me, Dad. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Well, I was going to add that we've done wildflowers the same way. We did it around town a few years ago. Just overseeded a bunch of oats. We did it in your backyard. Overseeded a bunch of oats in the fall, and let them grow, let them do their thing. And that spring, late winter, early spring, we just overseeded a bunch of wildflower seed. One of them we mowed. Another one I came back and sprayed it with clethodim to kill the grasses, and they both came up equally well.
They did.
And so it goes to show that method works along a wide range.
So, Lanny, what have we learned?
I mean, where there's a will, there's a way. You know what I mean? There's a lot of places we get access to that we think about putting food plots in, but just because we can't get a tractor there or other things, we kind of turn our nose and turn away from it. I just, there's a way to get it done.
Yes.
Being able to listen to everybody around here. I'm already the whole time everybody's talking, I'm like, you know what? I can do that right there. If I get over there, I can do that. I can get my weed whip all kind of places. You know what I mean? So. Just getting out there and, getting after it. I mean, that's the joy of it anyways.
Yeah. 10 years ago, folks would have said we were crazy or 20 years ago, trying some of these practices, but the fact of the matter is the facts change. Facts can change.
Absolutely.
And we're just learning more and more.
Well, and you got people like Mississippi State, Bronson Strickland. They kind of they've been advocates for this for a few years, and Bronson's kind of trying to teach. So I think at the end of the day, the agricultural industry, how these farmers are learning to do things, kind of has found its way back over here. We're learning from them what they're doing.
Yeah, and I'm gonna tell you what, the rising cost of fuel and fertilizer is really helping it too.
Yes.
So.
Yeah, I was going to say,
economics,
Todd, 4 years no fertilizer.
Yeah, so I was thinking like Dudley's way. Or my way is burn 50 gallons of, high-priced off-road diesel, and Dudley's burning 2 gallons of gas out of a four-wheeler and a weed eater.
Yeah, I got to figure out how to get the glyphosate out of the picture next. And cut even more costs.
So, Dave, we appreciate you being on. We really appreciate you helping Todd. It sounds like you are the guy that really helps Todd have his food plots.
He couldn't help but take a dig.
I've learned much from Dave.
Well, look, you guys, y'all have a really special relationship. Todd, is Dave your uncle? Is that right?
Yes, married to my mom's sister.
All right.
All right. Well, Dave, we sure appreciate you helping Todd. Is there anything that you guys that we hadn't covered that you guys feel like is important we need to make sure we talk about?
How much time you got?
Yeah, well.
Careful. It's lunchtime.
Yeah,
that's right.
Well, look, this has been good. Guys, this is our 98th episode.
Wow.
Yeah, so, we're doing this giveaway. We started with a $250 gift card to Gamekeepers Fieldwear 2 weeks ago. Last week, that was a pair of Leopold sunglasses.
Yes.
And this week, it's a pair of Russell boots.
Man.
So, yeah, of the Gamekeeper edition.
Russell Moccasin.
Yeah, that's
Russell
right.
boots.
So,
the Russell Moccasin.
yeah, that's
In
right.
Bottomland, I'm sure.
So yeah,
Ooh.
so you get to
Wow.
pick. Yeah, so you'll measure your foot and send it to Joe, and they'll send you back a pair of boots.
Our buddy
So-
Joe, been a friend for a long time.
So
sure
we've got to
has.
come up with the code for people to use this week. So I think Richie is
We
somewhere.
got a trivia question for number 9. Is it number 98?
It's number 98.
98.
Yep, it sure is. So none of us at the table know this question.
Well, I've
so,
gotten all of them wrong up to this point, so there's no way to go but up.
So y'all hang in over there with us, Todd.
Yeah. Hey, and congratulations. That's I've also heard that this podcast is ranked fairly highly or fairly high in ratings, I guess, if there are such a thing.
There
for
is, and it
podcasts.
is.
So
We're very proud of that.
congratulations.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
think about 7 or 8 of us listen to it a week, and we really enjoy it.
Growing every week.
Yeah, there we go. All right, Richie, what
Here
tell
comes
us?
the question. Maybe
All
we'll
right,
get
here
it
comes the
right.
question here. So, according to a study conducted by the University of Georgia, what is the average fall home range of a mature buck in acres? All right, so
Georgia.
in Georgia.
Georgia.
In Georgia?
Georgia.
So the home range.
Boy, you're
average
gonna give
home
us.
range
You're
of a
gonna give
buck.
us some, obviously, to pick from.
Well, to be honest, Mac McKellar here just gave me the question, did not give me anything else.
No answer.
So
Yes,
no,
one
I gave him
answer.
an answer, but no. So, I
So
can
we
get-
have to get the number of acres.
Can we phone a friend?
No.
Let's call Bronson.
You can estimate. How about that? You know,
All right.
All right.
Who
And this is in the
answers it?
South or in the?
You say buck or doe?
it's a buck, a mature buck in a fall home range. All right.
How many acres?
How many acres? According to a study conducted by the University of Georgia, what is the average fall home range of a mature buck in acres?
I'm gonna say 1 square mile.
640.
So
640.
acres.
640.
So yeah, acres here.
600. What is that? 640 acres.
Yeah.
650 acres.
Dudley, you got a guess?
I think it's right there around 1,000.
Ooh,
1,000
he
acres.
just took my number.
1,000 acres.
I'm gonna say
I'm guessing-
1,001.
You
No,
can say-
Yeah.
Like the
1,001.
price is
I like
right.
that.
Ah, so,
But
I would guess higher than that. I would guess for a buck in the fall. My guess would be more like 2,500, maybe 3,000.
wow, yeah. No,
high roller.
That's not on running, boy.
I'm going to go in there at 800.
800.
Yeah.
All right. So is all our answers here? All right.
1,200.
What's your
1,200?
answer, Rich?
Dave?
I mean, just not to be redundant.
It was at 15, I think, weren't you? Did you say
I said 12.
12?
12.
Okay, well that's taken.
All right.
Well, you were 1,001.
I said yeah,
1,001,
and
yeah.
whatever. I'm with Dudley. I'm gonna sink or swim with Dudley. That wouldn't be
I'll
fair.
go
Yeah.
up then.
Y'all are really close. So the answer is 900 acres.
Oh, I was a
Wow.
little short, as always.
Well,
So that
You had some
means
thousands, had some 800s in there. So I
Yeah.
mean, yeah.
So the answer to this week's trivia question is
907 acres to be exact.
907. So, that's
so
what they
that
gotta
rounds
put in
up closer to 1,000 than to 800. Wow.
Yeah, it does.
Congratulations, Dudley.
I think I was closer, wasn't I?
What'd you
if
say?
you-
650.
I
No.
went over.
What'd you
though,
say?
You know,
I said 800.
Oh,
if we were on the
you are right in the question.
I will
Here we go. You
say-
get them right every time.
I will say we were all very close, other than Todd's Hail Mary.
Because those are those goofy Georgians here.
Yeah.
You know,
That's
you
right.
can't go by them.
Yeah, well. Wow.
So wait. Again, so go to the website, click on enter the podcast contest, I think, and the answer is, what is it, Richie?
907 acres.
907 is what you got to put in.
Yeah, and you got a chance to win some Russell boots.
Yeah.
From our friends at Russell Moccasin.
that is a
907.
big deal.
Yep.
It is.
907 is pretty precise.
It's
That's the
very
most
precise, so.
well-wearing, comfortable, durable. They are the bomb.
How long
Literally
have you
super
been wearing
cool.
Russell boots?
Long
Gosh,
time.
30 years.
Yeah.
Off and on. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
Well made.
Oh, I wear them almost every day.
And you probably have some of the original pairs that you.
I do.
that-
I sure do.
They
They last a long time.
Yeah.
I
That's
mean,
right.
they probably cost twice as much as a pair of nice church shoes, but you're going to have them for 20
Forever.
years,
Or more.
Yeah.
and they can resole them.
Yep.
They're comfortable.
Yep.
Yep.
I love mine.
It's good stuff.
Joe Gagno's a great guy. So next week we're going to give away a Gunner
Kennel.
Kennel Gamekeeper edition.
Another
Nice.
great guy.
Yeah.
Nice.
At And then the grand prize is that Browning A5 in Mossy Oak Bottomland.
And Bottomland, better than Bottomland.
That's right. And Tox is here, so we can't talk about that too much. But
right.
we've got that lined out. It's a beautiful A5 from our friends at Browning.
On the way to 100.
All right. So Dudley, do you have an Ask Dudley?
All right, Mac's not here to read it right now, so
Give me
I'll
read it.
Oh, you can do it.
Well, Mac was struggling reading last week.
He was.
We are thinking about seeing if his family
He
can
called
get
it a Google eye.
some money
Yeah.
back from Heritage Academy. there.
Some people write like they talk, and it's hard to read, Okay. So, hey, Dudley, I planted a row of 20 catalpa trees from you guys about 4 years ago at my farm in Pike County, Missouri. I was interested to learn that there is a Pike County, Missouri, not just
Right, about that.
Not Illinois.
Mississippi, too.
Yeah.
Alabama.
Yep, that's right.
Golly, it's everywhere.
Well, I think there was a guy named Pike that did a bunch of cool
Deer
stuff.
hunting.
Coming down the pike.
18 of the 20 catalpas made it and are doing awesome. I've got a few worms on them this year and wanted to know if you have any tricks for preserving them. He said freezing them. So, freezing them. I've read and heard too many methods, and I'm confused as to what the best method is. Any ideas? Thanks in advance. C. Moulton.
C. Moulton.
Well,
This is kind of a fishing question.
Yeah.
That's a tree
so-
fishing question, though.
Tree fishing
when
question.
we first started growing catalpa, I was really interested to know and find out that the larvae or the moths find the seedlings at the nursery, and we have to pick them off ourselves.
What?
So they have an innate sense to be
find
able to
that
hone
tree.
in on that type of foliage.
That's crazy.
That is nature's amazing.
That's
God's
unbelievable.
good work.
Oh,
And,
my gosh.
Anyway, they are an amazing bait. They don't come off the hook very easily, so you can catch multiple fish. I don't know. It's almost like shrimp or krill. Just fish lose their minds over it. So anyway, you can. It's almost like preparing corn to put up for the winter.
Right.
A lot of old timers used to put them in cornmeal and put them in like a coffee can and freeze them. Usually within a few months, they start kind of getting goopy and changing colors, and the skin kind of deteriorates. And so the best method I've found, and I read up on this and figured it out, but somebody actually applied for a patent a few years ago.
Wow.
And on how to do
crazy.
this. And,
Pretty cool.
obviously, it's pretty easy to copy the method. And so what you do is you blanch them. Just like corn or something. So you put them in the fridge, get them cool. They're always pooping stuff out and that kind of thing. So
maybe want to put it in your fridge now.
put them in like a big
The
bowl they
outside
can't
fridge.
escape from. Put them in the fridge. Let them cool down. It'll slow down their movement. And then rinse all of that off and drop them in boiling water for no more than 20 seconds.
Right.
Any more than 20 seconds, the skin starts to deteriorate. From there, you put them in an ice bath and
Cool 'em
quickly
back
cool them off. Some more dirty stuff may get in the water from them pooping more. Rinse them off and vacuum seal them.
That's crazy.
Have you tasted one?
And then you can vacuum seal. No, I've not. That's one thing I won't taste. And you can vacuum seal them in the amount that you think you're going to use fishing in a day.
So if you want to catch 10 fish, put your 10
And then you
top
can
worms
put
in
all
there.
of those little packages in its own like gallon Ziploc freezer bag, throw them in the freezer. When you're ready to go fishing, grab a pack.
That's a great analogy about blanching corn, because also you could just get your set for the whole entire next year if you have enough of them.
Sure.
That's pretty amazing.
Some not old timers, but some folks actually will put a little bit of corn syrup in the water. You know how sugar's like a preservative when you're
That's amazing.
making jellies and things, but the water method seems to work just fine.
How many years after a catalpa tree is planted do you start seeing these moths? laying
Well,
eggs?
I was just saying earlier, they find the seedlings at the nursery.
Well, this guy said 4, I think. You just talked to. So Pretty quick.
Yeah, very quick.
And those worms end up eating most all the leaves off that tree, don't they?
Right. One little tidbit about Catalpa. They say pawpaws transplant better in the spring. I've had much better luck transplanting pawpaws in the mid to late fall.
Catalpas or pawpaws?
Yeah, catalpas.
Gotcha.
Yeah, pawpaw, they like the spring for some reason.
And catalpa late fall.
Yep, I don't have
All right,
the
just in
greatest
time.
success transplanting catalpa in the spring.
How far north do these catalpa trees go? Do these just they're
Well,
shaking their heads like they don't
there's
even
a-
know what a catalpa
There's
is.
a catalpa speciosa, which is northern catalpa, and we have in the south catalpa bignonioides.
Bignonioides.
Yeah.
I like that.
Dave was just telling me that he has a couple on his property, but he's not seen any kind of worms on them.
Yeah, it's funny. It's kind of like deer and acorn trees. There's certain individuals that they like more. Some of the ones planted in the landscape were probably selected from trees that the worms don't go to as much. So the trick is to collect seed from or propagate from trees that the the moths like.
Yeah, you need some native nurseries ones. We'll get you some up there.
Well, the catfish sure do like the
Oh my
catalpa
goodness,
worm.
everything does.
Bluegill, red ear,
I'm
bass.
planting
Bass, love them.
I've even heard of folks catching saltwater fish on them.
I've baited trout lines with them and caught fish like
for
crazy.
sure.
Oh yeah.
I'm in. I can't believe I don't have any already.
Yeah, I can't believe you don't either.
I don't either.
Now that I think about it,
I will have
Now,
some in the ground.
You
this
could
fall.
get your trout lining buddies, Laney, and y'all could put up a bunch just like freezers full of corn, and then you just think about how easy that would be to pull one out and just go set
Go
lines
fishing,
with them.
yeah.
Not have to seine for shad and do all that stuff.
I'm in.
Yeah.
Have to call Big Dave. See what the toys look like.
All right, guys. Well, look, is there anything else we need to discuss here? I think this has
Been a good one.
pretty interesting.
Yeah,
Yeah,
very
Very.
Todd, Dave, we certainly appreciate you being a part here. Thank you so much.
Enjoyed it.
Thanks for what y'all
Enjoyed it
do.
a lot.
I would like to say, encourage everybody who's listening, if you've experimented, send us a note, send us an email.
Email with photos.
Yeah,
We love
send
that
something.
kind of
I'd love
stuff.
to know, because we're going to keep learning more from everybody out there. This actually is kind of like a test plot thing.
Yeah, having some
and
success.
what have you experienced? We'd love to hear from you.
Yes.
That's
100%.
Yeah, because and there's so many different ways to do things.
Yes.
And timing is everything. If there's one
Timing
thing that
is
I
everything.
think came out of this is that
Yep.
timing is important.
Yeah, and to add to Toxie's, I think we mentioned it earlier. Don't try something once and fail and give up.
Never give up.
I have
What are you
folks
talking
call
about?
and they're like, "Man, I planted brassicas once and the deer didn't eat them,
And
and
the deer ate all of them.
I'm not going to plant them again." Well, we all know if you keep trying for
Yes.
3 years, they start nibbling on it.
I wish mine wouldn't eat them. That's a problem.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is.
We're overrun.
Well, this has been good. Toxie, if you got anything you want to,
No.
is there anything going on at Montreal we need to make? The ICAST show's coming up
Yeah,
here pretty
ICAST is
soon.
coming up this week, so they'll be down there. At the
There's
fishing
lots of
show.
stuff.
Lots of stuff going on.
Yeah.
Too
There's
much to
still
mention.
some turkey stamps, guys.
Yeah.
You'll
Check
be
the turkey
supportive
stand.
of
I
that.
got a lot of new fishing gear out, because the summer's coming around. So check it out.
Yep, that's it. All right. Well, Richie, have you got anything? You think we covered everything? That sound good? So Richie's nodding his head. So
Looking
why don't
good.
you say goodbye, Dudley?
Goodbye, Dudley.
Get us out of here, Mac. Mac, where is Mac?
Thanks for tuning in to this week's episode of the Gamekeeper Podcast. And be sure to tune in again. Subscribe to Gamekeeper Farming for Wildlife magazine, and don't miss the Mossy Oak Properties Fistful of Dirt podcast with my good buddy, Ronnie Cuz Strickland.